So far, to solve quadratic functions, we have talked about using the zero product property, which we looked at each factor and figured out what x would have to be to make each factor equal to 0. And whatever those x values were, those were our solutions. Because when a factor was 0, then the whole function equaled 0. And so those were x-intercepts. Next, we looked at what we should do when we have a function in standard form, and we said we can use the quadratic formula. And so this is how we use the quadratic formula to find our solutions. And lastly, the third part of learning target 9 is solving by graphing. Now, when you solve by graphing, we're going to graph the function on our calculator. We can use this method when it's in any form, not just standard form or factored form with the zero product property. But we can use this strategy when the function is in any form. It's also probably the easiest strategy if you have a calculator handy. However, you do need to know how to use the quadratic formula. In Algebra 2, you will have to use the quadratic formula because you're going to encounter a lot of parabolas that look like this. They don't ever cross the x-axis. And so in order to find the solution here, you need to actually use the quadratic formula, which will give you imaginary solutions, not real number solutions. You'll learn more about that in Algebra 2, but I just wanted to tell you why you can't always graph it. Also, when you go to take the SAT, there's a part on the SAT that doesn't allow you to use your calculator. So you won't be able to graph it to find the answer. You will have to use the quadratic formula to find the answer. So I want you to be prepared for Algebra 2. I want you to be prepared for the SAT. And that's why in Algebra 1, we're requiring that you know how to use the quadratic formula because you won't always have the option of graphing. So, looking at this, and on your test, there will be problems that do require you to use the quadratic formula. But looking at this, we are able to graph each of these. So the way that we do that is we take our calculator. So if you don't have your calculator right now, pause this video and go and get your calculator. Okay, now that you have your calculator, we're going to start a graph. So just go to New Document. No, we don't want to save. Add a graph. Okay, and I'm going to make my screen a little bit darker so you can see it here. There we go. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to, in our graph, plug in this equation. So we have x squared minus 6x minus 16. Okay, my x's appear to be capitalized right now because I have apparently caps lock on. But that doesn't make a difference as long as you're using this x button right down here. Okay? And then we hit enter, and there's our graph. So if we want to figure out what these answers are, we can go into Menu, down to Analyze Graph, and it says it right here in your notes, Menu, Analyze Graph, there we go, and zeros. We're going to find the zeros because we want to know what the x values are when y is 0, the x-intercept. So we're going to hit 0, and then we're going to get our vertical dotted black line to the left of it and click, and then scroll it over across one of them. And the first 0 is happening at -2. So that means one solution, if we were just to sketch this, is happening at x equals -2. And the other one, looks like you can only do one at a time. So we'll click off of that, and then do it again. Menu, Analyze Graph, 0, and we'll go to the left of the second one, click, scroll over, and it looks like that one's happening at 8. Right there, it says 8. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Way up there at x equals 8. If I'm just going to sketch this, it looks something like that. Okay? So here's my two solutions found by graphing. I could have got those solutions by putting it in factored form and using the zero product property. I could have got those solutions by taking my A, B, and C and using the quadratic formula. I can also get those two solutions by graphing. Let's look at the next one. So I'm going to hit Tab. Maybe. Tab. Oh, it's like graphing and grabbing onto that. Tab. I'm going up to the first one. I'm erasing what I have because I don't want to have a whole bunch of equations in here. So I'm going to erase this. And I'm going to re-type in the second one. So x squared plus 2x plus 5. Enter. And this is an example of one that does not have any real solutions. We could not solve this one by graphing. And if we were to use the quadratic formula, we would end up with a negative number underneath our square root, and you can't take the square root of a negative number. That's when we get into imaginary solutions. So in Algebra 1, we're not going to worry about this. We're just going to say no real solutions. There are imaginary solutions, but we haven't learned how to do those yet. So we're just going to say no real solutions at this point. And we know that because there are no places where this graph touches the x-axis. Now let's look at this next one. So I'm going to hit Tab again, go up top, go back up to my equation that's already there and delete that one so I can replace it. I'm going to type in 2x squared plus 4x plus 4. And remember, if I'm going too fast, just pause the video and you can catch up. Enter. And this is another example of one that doesn't touch. So this is another example that we're going to say no real solution. If it did touch, we would just go to Menu, Analyze Graph, and then to 0, and then you're going to just make your line to the left, scroll over, click, and see what that value is where it's crossing the x-axis, and then do it again for the other 0. And that's how you solve a quadratic function by graphing.